For black people, the civil rights era was the worst time in American history.
My best friend, well, he's like one of my best friends, this kid Gemini from the East Coast, and he's a black dude, and he said he tells me that all the time. He says, I hate the civil rights movement, but I want to hear what you...
Because it started with that goddamn song. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. When the fuck is someday? Who has ever accomplished anything sustainable? I'm going to do it someday.
Absolutely.
That bullshit's in us chasing after white folks.
So we're live, man.
Yeah. We're definitely live. Yeah,
we're definitely live. Also, I know we have some people in the room, and that's okay. Everything is just comfortable here. There's no.
Why are you wasting time, man? Come on, man. We met in a smoking car. Let's go.
Exactly. We did. Yeah. We did meet in a smoking car.
Yeah.
I can't. It's funny. What you just said a minute ago when we were talking about how you and I met.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot believe that it's been
17 years.
17 years since you and I first met. I mean, that's unreal to me.
Yeah, time changes everything except car tires and baby diapers.
Why is it though that?
You gotta change them yourself, and you got to turn your phone off. I thought I turned it down, but we was talking about that a minute ago. So this phone is in charge, man. So I'm gonna have to turn it off. Excuse me for that.
You're okay.
Yeah. Sick of these phones. Look, just going off. Okay, let's go.
But why is it that time, it seems like, only seems to matter the older you get?
Because it's scary. When you're younger, you have no concept of it, and it flies by in increments because they say life changes every 5 years in a measurable way. The first 5 is on your peeps, if you have them.
Right.
The second 5, you think you're in charge, but you're really not. By the time you're 15, you done got choked a couple of times, acting like you under your own roof, because you got a little hair on your chest and, a little mustache or whatever. But it's amazing, man. By the time you get to be 50, it seems like it goes from, day by day to, damn, where did the year go?
Yeah.
And then by the time you get 60, you be like, damn.
What's crazy is mathematically, the reason why that happens is because when you're 10 years old, a year is 1/10 of your life. When you're 50 years old, a year is 1/50th of your life. So the older you get, each year becomes fractionally smaller by comparison of how long you've existed. So that's why it goes by so fast.
I always wonder why I was fascinated with you. I never thought of life that way. That's fascinating. It's kind of sobering, too.
Yeah, it totally is. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. But, I've never, given the fact that you've been around as long as you have and you're so healthy and vibrant and smart, and I watch your show, Uncle Bobby's Corner. I've seen like the way that
Country Corner.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I knew I was going to mess that up when I said it earlier.
Yeah.
But I watched it and I'm sitting there and I'm going to myself like, this guy is sharper. Like you're interviewing people that have been, that are like my age or whatever. And it seems like you, like I was saying, like not to bring up the Jason Whitlock interview, but we were going to touch on it.
So yeah.
We were going to touch on it. He's straw manning the hell out of you over and over and over again. And your patience to sit there and listen to him make these outlandishly wrong arguments that are just so not even arguing what you was even arguing, and then come in and just say 5, 6 quick short little things, and it's just like boom, you just got destroyed. And it's like you give me hope that life is long, and life can be enjoyed for a very, very long time. Like it's not like you know what I mean?
Because I know more than that, because when I first met you, it was life-changing because at that point, man, I just pretty much gave up on having a relationship with white people. It was just that difficult. Plus, I stayed in predominantly black environments, and I only interacted with white people at social events, right? And then I meet you, and you were so pure in your innocence and your youth, and you really just, reminded me in so many ways of myself and made me wish that I was white. I'm like, damn, he get away with shit that I can't get away with, but he's cool with it. You know what I mean? And then when I learned your background, I knew it was honest, because you took me into environments when you came to California that we had to just like each other, because people were kissing your ass at the highest levels of Hollywood.
That's true.
And they look at me like, hey, what he doing here? This old dude. And he with me. Now all of a sudden they offer me coffee and shit. And I'm like, this is my cat right here. So we had an honest relationship. And I've enjoyed the benefits of that in terms of being able to use that as an example of the possibilities, that it's not what you do, it's who you are. Mm-hmm. So it was a fair exchange, in other words.
Absolutely. Well, when you say that you got to the point where you almost gave up on having relationships with white people, like, if you had maybe said something like that to me 5 years ago, I probably would have had a whole different thing to say about that. But this is something that I'm starting to have an issue with, meaning that I personally am starting to have an issue having relationships with a lot of white people. And I'm going to tell you why and where I'm coming from with this. I never have I ever in my life experienced such unbelievable vitriol toward black and brown people and racism in my life until I decided to support Bernie Sanders. Now, I'm an advocate for Bernie Sanders because I believe that he's a New Deal Democrat. He's nothing different than Franklin D. Roosevelt, which the policies that FDR put forth in the 40s or the 1930s and 40s were what created the middle class in the first place. I know that there's been a giant concentration of wealth that's gone to the top. So when I look at his policies, some of them, of course, social programs, which I believe need to exist, I'm looking at it from the perspective of policies. I'm not looking at it from the perspective of social issues. I'm not looking at it from perspective of, anything having to do with feminism or Me Too movements, or all this shit is a distraction. So my support for Bernie was based off of something that was pure and intellectual. And when I came out publicly with my position on that, I lost 90% of my fan base. White dudes came out of the woodwork. I get threats. People telling me they're going to beat me down on the street when they see me, that they're going to jump me because I'm anti-Trump. Like, I mean, the shit that I'm seeing.
Hold up right there. Let's make a public service announcement. Y'all better ask somebody who poverty is, first of all. All right, don't go for that Thommy Kane shit. All right, because if you hit him, he's going to hit you back. Let's get that straight right now. All right. So you about safe as bear pussy when it comes to that kind of shit. All right. Ain't nobody going to be rushing you. I know you too well.
I've come a long way to try not to be street. And some of these people, this is something that I've realized. And it really comes down to this. And I think that, and I'm glad that I'm able to sit in front of a black man and say this, because I think it's very important for if anybody to hear what I'm about to say is that in school, when you're a white kid and you are grown up in a majority all white school and you're being educated by a vast majority of white people, you're taught very, very briefly about a moment in time where there were these white people that enslaved black people. And then Abraham Lincoln came along and he freed the slaves. The end.
That was the beginning.
That was the beginning. But unless you've read W.E.B. Du Bois's fucking Black Reconstruction or like have any information on any of those things that took place across 50 to 80 years that followed that, you don't really know anything about that. So you have a bunch of these ignorant white dudes that don't even have a real understanding. They were born at a time when things are different, and they look around and they like have these they have these completely, well, what are they talking about? Everyone's equal now, like anyone can get a job. It's all about the content of your character. And I'm like, that shit is bullshit, man. Like, it's bullshit. If you've read anything and you know anything about history, That shit is complete bullshit. But then these people argue that history is, this is what I get all the time. Oh, you're just brainwashed by the liberals.
Well,
the liberals control education.
You know
and
what
they're lying
history is? History is his story. And the people that I feel really some empathy for, but it doesn't last long because they are so enamored with something that they're not. All right. If you white and poor, it's your goddamn fault. All right?
100%.
Because you have not been subjected to the indignities, the laws that prevented you from owning property and all of these impediments. You didn't have those goddamn problems. What you did was you drank the wrong Kool-Aid. Because at a certain point, it's class. If you're not a Rockefeller or a Kennedy or a Trump, they're not talking about you.
Exactly.
But they have given you this illusion that you can become them. And you still in West Virginia with black lung, no insurance, no money, no life, but you still would rather be you than a black man. How much fucking sense does that make?
It doesn't. It doesn't. And when you look at this, what you just said about the them lying to you and making you think you can become them, that is so fucking true. And it's like they keep on selling this lie that hard work is what leads to success. And it's like, if that was true, like, I mean, it's a quote that I'll borrow from Jon Stewart, but Mexicans with leaf blowers would run this country. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's not true.
I got to put this in here. My uncle, James Glanton, lived to be 86 years old, and he impregnated me with a belief system that has prevailed long after his passing. He told me, he said, son, if you get a propaganda to the proper goose, you'll need a Brinks truck to take the money to the bank. If you tell people what they want to hear, and that includes Bernie Sanders to a degree. If I was gonna vote, I was gonna vote for Bloomberg, and I'll tell you why. He does not have the incentive to steal that Trump had. See, Trump is a complete fraud, an absolute fraud. He don't believe in none of the stuff that he promotes, none of it. He don't even know the Bible, but he got the Bible believers in his hip pocket because they keep giving him mulligans. That's what they call it, even though we're not playing golf. They give him mulligans, you know, the religious right. Well, what if he don't know the difference between 2 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians? Okay, because he will do the things that we need him to do, like protect their bullshit. Abortion, they want that gone. They want to put Christianity everywhere, even though they don't live a Christian life themselves.
He's a snake oil salesman.
So I guess the point I'm making, Tommy, as it relates to race and when it's a factor and when it's not. The only time it's not a factor is when you laying on a hospital bed, bleeding to death, and you have a need for blood. Do you really want to be that racist, not to take that B positive from this dark-skinned person? See, that shit goes out the window when it's life and death.
It does.
But it'll transform back into what it was once you get through the crisis. Because I've seen a lot of men that went to war together. I had, relatives that fought in World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, and all these other skirmishes. And when you're in that foxhole, man, you ain't got time to be giving a shit about what color somebody is. But when you go to town, it's a whole different situation.
It's a whole different dynamic. Yeah. I'll tell you one of the reasons why I have a problem with Bloomberg. And I know a lot of people love the idea that he had a lot of money. But see, to me, that's exactly the problem. See, because this is the thing. In the early 1900s, and a lot of people don't know this, but healthcare in general, just we'll use healthcare as an example. Healthcare consisted of people didn't really get sick. And when you did get sick, the doctor came to your house. And if you were wealthy enough to own a place to live, you would die in your house. And if you were poor and indigent, you would die in a hospital. All a hospital was for indigent people to die. And then these doctors in Dallas, Texas got together and said, people only pay us when they're sick. How can we figure out a way to have a better business model? They looked at the makeup industry at the time, who was selling makeup on a month-to-month subscription basis to people. And they were basically saying, that, hey, we ought to do what they do. Let's figure out a way to sell medical care on a month-to-month basis. If we have people pay us $3 a month, whenever they get sick, their bills are covered. So they tried the model on the teachers in Dallas. And when it started to work and the teachers were like, yeah, this is a cool idea, they started doing it all throughout Texas. And that company became Blue Cross. That was the invention of health insurance. And then what happened is during World War II, when everybody had left to fight the war, a lot of businesses were failing because they couldn't find labor. So they said, hey, that healthcare idea is good. Why don't we pay for people's healthcare, and that'll be an extra incentive. And that's how employer-backed healthcare happened. But then what happened is that the government decided to give companies a 100% tax write-off on that healthcare. And because of that, because whatever they're paying for people's healthcare would be completely written off, they said, well, wait a second. So that means instead of giving people livable wages or paying people more money, we can argue that the reason why we're not paying them more money is because we're paying for their health insurance coverage, which is like 2/3 of their income. And then we'll say that that's the reason why. But what people don't realize is that they're getting 100% reimbursement on that 2/3 healthcare. So this whole thing was a racket. So then the medical industry comes in and says, hey, we have an idea. Let's jack up the prices so that insurance companies can jack up the cost. And we'll charge $50,000 for something that should only cost $5,000. But then the insurance company will pay us $5,000. And, and it's like, but the actual person will have to have insurance or else they'll have to pay the full $50,000. So this entire scam has been running. It's not based on any kind of real capitalism. It's not based on anything. It's just a scam.
Hold up there. Hold up. Let's be a little more factual. You're leaving out one important component of that, the Rockefeller family. The Rockefellers, they're dominant for a reason. I mean, it's been generations of conniving and scheming and what have you. They bought up all of the medical practices. And that's a problem right there. One thing you shouldn't practice is medicine, especially on me. I don't want you practicing on me. The body will heal itself, but they will not allow you to use your health insurance to buy herbs or any treatments that involve non-altered chemical products.
Right.
And that's for a reason. They shouldn't call it health care like they shouldn't call it life insurance. That's death insurance. That's not life insurance. That's sick insurance. They don't incentivize keeping people well.
Exactly.
And when you go in a doctor's office, his incentive is to give you as many prescriptions as he can. All he needs to do is give you one. And then you're going to leave out of there with 10 side effects.
Right.
So when you look at the healthcare system, we need to broaden the scope of the conversation, because the real problem is the premise. Are we trying to preserve life, protect life, or are we trying to finance sickness?
Well, anytime you have a for-profit system, you have to worry about bullshit. Because if somebody is trying to sell something, they're going to lie to you because they're trying to sell something. And we have laws in place that actually protect salesmen, where it allows salesmen to lie to you to sell things.
Sure.
So if you have a for-profit healthcare system, then you are 100% going to have a problem. That's why all these other countries around the world don't have that, and they have a universal, single-payer healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
It's because when you take the element, when you're dealing with people's lives, I felt like my nephew even told me, when I'm sick, because he learned how to speak Japanese, he trained himself how to do it. So when he's sick, he goes to Japanese websites and reads Japanese doctor sites to get medical advice, because he knows in Japan, they'll be honest, because nobody's trying to sell you anything there because healthcare is covered under taxes.
Well, you mentioned Japan, and about 12 years ago, a good friend of mine, we call him Adonijah, his real name is John Harrison, and this guy ate food right out of the ground that he grew at his home up in View Park, not too far from where you watch the football game at. And he's the modern day George Washington Carver. And the first thing he told me was something I didn't want to hear. He said, let me tell you something about it. If it breathes, bleeds, or gives birth, you're going to have trouble digesting it. Right. And eliminating it. So when you see people with these great big old stomachs, they have consumed food that went beyond the expiration date to be inside the body, because what food is supposed to do is enliven the body, which means you should be eating living food. So if you really want to get down to the healthcare crisis, it's not about whether you got healthcare or not. It's what is the prescription for the most healthiest life. The people who are most healthiest around the world, that live to be 110, 120, and still sexually active. And
they're not taking pharmaceutical drugs.
They ain't doing none of that shit.
Right.
They ain't doing none of that shit. So we have to really go beyond this issue of whether or not you got health care or not. You don't have health care. What you have is a prescription to be on medication the rest of your goddamn life. And that's a flawed model. And we are so far away from that that's a whole nother discussion that I don't want to get into. That makes a lot of sense.
I never thought of it like that.
No, man, the body will heal itself, man. A friend of mine has a book called The Body Talks. Pain is a knock on the door. Medication is a muffler. And it tricks you into thinking that you're getting well, when actually you will end up with a tray of medication. And this has happened to people I love. I've seen people needlessly die because they went into chemo. How you going to poison the body into health? Think about that for a minute. How you going to inject poison into somebody's body and make them well? You know what most cancer patients die of? Pneumonia. They die from pneumonia, not cancer, because that's just a word any goddamn way. Let's move on though, because we can get stuck there for the rest of the show.
Yeah, that's crazy that you put it. Well, I guess I'll kind of explain where I was going with the Bloomberg thing. Is that I know that historically in the early 1900s, when we went through the Great Depression, that when Franklin D. Roosevelt took office, he was actually a fiscal conservative. Financially, like he wanted to go in there and balance the budget. When he got in there, he noticed very quickly that there was a major problem where the Rockefellers, the Tafts,
the Mellons,
all those powerful families, J.P. Morgan, Carnegie, they all had so much money that it was creating a banana republic at the time. So he implemented certain systems like taxing the wealthy with a marginal tax rate of 75%, putting in all of these, he created the GI Bill, Social Security, all that type of stuff.
The WPA was the most important one.
Oh, what is it?
The WPA, it was a work program. It put people to work doing things that we needed, like building roads, the highway system, and all of that. And that changed everything because it was practical. Like you said, he was a fiscal conservative. And that was a time when, to be industrialized, you had to move stuff around the country.
Right.
You see? So they built the highways and the byways and the train systems and all of that. So it wasn't giveaway work. It was actually meaningful work at a living wage.
And this is the world we live in. Ronald Reagan praised FDR because Ronald Reagan's family got money because his father benefited from those jobs that were brought in through that program. And then years later, Ronald Reagan slashed the marginal tax rate down to 28%. That was the end of the wealthy paying their fair share in this country. That was the beginning of... See, we live in a time now where it used to be that General Electric and other huge companies like that would have all these different... We'd have factories. We were a manufacturing company. We produced lots of things and manufactured lots of things. When those things took place and Wall Street started to pay off politicians to systematically remove all of the things that FDR had in place, namely the marginal tax rate, the Glass-Steagall Act, all those things that, once those things were lifted, it allowed a money game to happen that basically made it so that we financialized the economy. So in other words, companies like General Electric that used to make things to make profit now make more money just moving around their money in complicated ways. They literally can just invest their money into different markets and different businesses because capital can leave the country. Labor can't leave the country. So when you're hiring people and, you have the ability to get to a point where you say, well, you know what, this doesn't matter because we could take this big bulk of this wealth and we could store it in all these different places around the world and let our money make more and more and more money. That created a problem where that's how all of that wealth got concentrated at the top. Now we're in the same predicament that we were in the early 1900s.
Mhm.
So the last thing I want is a guy like Bloomberg who's super wealthy. He's worth $60 billion. I did the math the other day. If you had a 40-hour a week job and you made $100 an hour, which is a pretty good gig, if you worked every single week since humans were first discovered on planet Earth 300,000 years ago, you would not have the amount of money that Mike Bloomberg has. If you had a $100 an hour job and worked 40 hours a week for 300,000 years, he would have more money than you.
Okay, what's
so
your
you
point?
can't earn $60 billion. You can't. No human. You can accrue $60 billion, but you can't earn $60 billion, which is why I get so frustrated when people say, well, he worked for that money. No, he didn't. He didn't. People worked for that money, and his money worked for that money. A corrupt system allowed him to be able to have his money make money, and he was able to take advantage of the labor of working class people. That's why he made that money, but he did not personally earn $60 billion. And that's the reason why people like him need to pay back into the system that allowed him to be worth that much money in the first place. And so when you have somebody like him becoming president and spending, I mean, think about it. The president makes $400,000 a year. Why would somebody spend $500 million to get a job that pays $400,000 a year?
Okay.
Is it because he's just a nice guy?
Well, there's two ways of looking at that. Because he has spoken about the environment, he has more sensitivity to the frailty of the planet than the Trumpster does. The Trumpster don't give a damn about his children, his grandchildren, nobody, because at some point, your money is not going to be able to accommodate 120 degrees.
That's true.
Okay. That's going to burn everybody up. Okay. But he's so into himself that he really knows. I'm 70-something years old. I'm in bad health. They propping me up. I'm out of here in a little while. Who gives a fuck? He doesn't. Bloomberg, quite possibly, is a little more sensitive to the fact that we probably done went a little too far. See, it's a line out there that you talked about that's been crossed again. Back in that era that you're talking about, see, when you get to the point where there's no middle class, you done made predators out of hardworking people. And at some point, pop go to weasel. You know, when people see that they're not getting ahead, you look at Enron. They had hundreds, thousands of people who invested all of that paper wealth that they made working for Enron back into Enron. They are now waiters at Walmart. Greeters at Walmart. These people worked 30, 40 years, and on paper they was worth $1 million, $1.2 million. They didn't get to spend a dime of that money because they found out it was paper wealth. See, it's perceived value. And we pay for our ignorance. You know, they say ignorance is bliss until you find out how stupid you really are. And that's what most people are. They do not understand the system itself. Because the reason I'm sitting here with you is I had to come to the conclusion that most white people went for the bullshit. And a lot of black people went for some other bullshit. We actually bought into the bullshit y'all told us about ourselves. Then you turn around 30 years later, white girls growing booties, got lips, kinky hair. The shit that we was giving away. You know what I mean? And it's like, wait a minute, hold on.
It's so
man.
true.
What kind of bullshit is really going on? And it has allowed me to, in a very narrow way, deal case by case. Because I got about, I ain't gonna get off my fingers and toes in terms of people that I would call friends to me that happen to be white. And they know how I am. And they got some friends that ain't the same way, and they know not to invite me to none of those affairs.
Right.
You see? And so I just try to live in that reality that you can't put everybody into the same box. But one of the things that's most frightening right now is the white people that you started talking about a few minutes ago that have bought into this bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's awful.
No, man, I got a partner of mine that lives in Birmingham, man. And he's telling me some frightening stories, man. The South, they said would rise again. And the things that are going on, but it's not, you can go out to Lakewood, the hinterland of L.A., and see a lot of that same mentality, man. because everybody want to blame somebody for their condition.
Absolutely.
And a lot of white people are saying it's the Mexicans' fault. Man, you're not going out there and toiling them fields for no $7 an hour. You ain't doing that shit.
Exactly.
What you need to understand is you're being replaced by automation and greed and a misdirection of American resources. The roads around this country and the bridges and all that stuff are in such disrepair that it's unbelievable. You go into major cities and your biggest expense is getting your car realigned every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Unless you live in certain neighborhoods. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So it's not a giveaway to invest in the infrastructure. The problem is the people that Trump owe, they ain't in that business. They in the oil and gas business. And that's why we're not going towards solar and wind. But guess what? People like Boone Pickens and some of those other guys, they hedging their bets. Because they know that's the only way we're going to save the planet, man. We cannot continue to burn fossil fuel like we do.
No, it's
unsustainable.
It's unbelievable that we have 99% of the world's scientists that are saying that this is happening, and we have the Republicans are the most dangerous group of people.
They're not the only one. No.
World.
Hold on. Wait a minute. No.
I
tell you the difference between a Democrat and a Republican. Nothing.
Oh, I agree with you. But no, there is a difference.
What?
There is a difference. Climate change. Democrats have never once ever denied it. In fact, they've done everything that they can.
Not everything.
Everything that you got to get through Congress. You got to get the stuff through Congress.
Then you have to act congressional. Okay. They get slapped and start crying. Sometimes you got to politics is dirty, man.
Oh yeah.
You got to call a liar.
Well, that's the thing is
and
that
a cheat.
I've never really been a fan of either because I understand the propaganda that works behind both. One of the reasons why I was willing to support Bernie, which this is the most I've ever advocated for anybody ever running for president ever in my entire adult life, is because of the fact that he does. First of all, it's very hard to have any individual that's his age that no matter how far you dig or try to find anything, there's literally zero that you can find on Bernie Sanders to badmouth him or trash him.
What?
He doesn't have any incidences with women. He doesn't have any incidences of he was arrested during the civil rights movement.
Hold on. You need to stop right there with Bernie, okay? First of all, okay. Bernie got 3 houses. He married a rich woman. And so his sensitivity is existential. You see what I mean? It's been a long time since he missed a meal. Long time. But the biggest problem I got with Bernie is the absence of pragmatism. Because you cannot promise stuff to people that you can't deliver on. Number one, the elephant in the room is the deficit, what they call a deficit, which is money we owe England. Okay? And the oligarchs. All right, because we borrowed money to start this country, and we've been paying it back ever since. And then we put in these triggers that everybody keeps ignoring, so the debt ceiling keeps rising. But we got some new debt holders, the Chinese. And if they call in the debt, then we're going to have to start a whole nother monetary system, because that's how much money the same fiscal hawks are now letting the good time roll. Boom, just throwing it out there, raising the debt limit. But those are people holding that debt. Like China, you can't play with them because everything in your house is made over there.
Right.
Okay, and they own major properties here in the United States. So we've been misled to the degree that Bernie is overlooking the fact that, yes, we need to do certain things, but he needs to be a little more honest about the complications with that. Because the debt has to be serviced to a certain degree, or you got to renegotiate it. You got to do something. You owe people money. This country owes people money. But more importantly, the way that he's approaching it, I ain't heard him mention transportation yet. Those are well-paying jobs.
And they're about to all be gone by automation.
No, not in the next 25, 30 years. To build a building, you still need bodies, lots of them. The stadium they building in Inglewood, man, they got people working 3 shifts, and some of those people with less than a high school education are making $200,000 a year because they got a skill.
Oh, I thought you were referring to driving jobs. Driving jobs are about to all be wiped out by automation.
Yeah, but that's still a ways away. But I'm talking about right now, either you building something or tearing it down. That takes manual labor. But what we've gotten is folks that don't want to get their hands dirty until they find out That dude over there is making $65 an hour holding that sign for 10 hours a day. And that's just the existing system. We're not capitalizing on the existing system. We're in a city right now that has exploded in growth, L.A. Everywhere you go, you see skyscrapers. They just don't pop up.
No.
It's big money, man, that goes into those types of projects. But then once you do that, you have to have the utilities, you have to have the roads, you have to have a transportation system. We got a railway that's running from downtown to the airport. When they did the first line from downtown to the Santa Monica Pier, $1 trillion in wages and materials. So sometimes we got to look at the money streams.
How did you and Jim Brown meet?
Jim Brown, I met Jim Brown. Jim Brown didn't meet me.
Okay.
Because he was Jim Brown.
Right, exactly.
You know. And one of my cousins worked for Xerox, and Jim used to host a lot of events for community organizations trying to raise money at his house in Hollywood Hill. And so I went up to his house with my cousin, and I was, a big fan of Jim's, like all young black kids were. So it was just a privilege to be around him. And he had all these gangbangers at the house. So it was a mixed thing. And you got all of these, elite black folks, at this fundraiser. And he came in with like 20 of these killers. So it was some tension, And so I walked over to him. I said, man, it's a pleasure to meet you. And he looked at me like, who are you? I said, my name is Bobby Glanton-Smith. He said, what do you want? I said, well, man, I work with these contractors. He said, man, I hear this shit all the time. And he walked off, right? And I'm standing there just heartbroken, feelings hurt. And I had a friend of mine who knew him really well. He ran a restaurant down in the Crenshaw district. And I said, man, Jim blew me off, man. He said, well, he come by the restaurant all the time. So we just started running into each other at different events, right? And then my man told him, he said, man, Bobby talk a lot of shit, but he good people, man. He good people. So he watched me for about a year because we had a lot of mutual friends, all right? And then one day, he called me up to the house. I didn't know he had my number. He got it from one of my friends. He said, man, you talk a lot of shit. Do you do anything else? I said, yeah, man, I can write, And he said, write what? I said, anything that I feel is interesting, I can write. And he said, yeah. I said, yeah, I done wrote a book called Let's Go to Work. And I showed him the book. And then he called me a couple of weeks later and asked me to come up to the house. And when I got there, there was a lot of cars in the driveway, right? And so he said, go on in the living room. I'll be out in a minute. And he went in his bedroom. So I walked in the living room, and there was 20 killers in there. And I'm talking about, shot callers. Because I had heard about the meetings he had been having, to stop the violence and, the gang warfare. So these were all leaders.
Like Bloods and Crips, basically.
Yeah. And I look around the room, and I see this one dude. I knew who he was because of who he was, Big U. And then I saw this other guy. He was wide as he was tall. And the way that he was looking at me and how everybody else was looking at him, I knew I had to go right at him. Because I had a suit on, and I'm the only one in there with a suit on, so they think I'm the FBI or something, And so Jim still ain't came out of his room. He told me to go in there, so I'm standing in there, and I looked at the dude who later became to me Rockhead Johnson, right? And he said, what set you from? I said, man, I'm from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, man. I don't know the difference between criminal blood, man. I ain't scared of you, though, And it got really quiet, right? And it was, just for a moment. I said, man, I'm serious, man. I ain't no gang member, man. But I'm from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, Reed Alley. That's the equivalent of a Crip or a Blood. And then since I didn't get jumped on, Jim came out of the bedroom and said, this is Bobby Glanton-Smith, and he's going to be writing the paper. He said, what you going to call it, Bobby? I said, the AmerI-Can Community News and World Report, just right there off the top of my head. And he said, then you're going to have to interview these cats right here. And then after that, everything calmed down, I knew he was testing me because they had to respect me, even though I wasn't from the culture.
Right.
And Jim Brown graduated from Syracuse University in 4 years. He lettered in lacrosse, football, basketball, and track and field. And he graduated in 4 years. But he didn't declare a major. And he is just one of the most physically intimidating, but more so mentally intimidating people I've ever met.
Wow.
But because he gonna seek the truth from you, because he know who he is. And if you try to bullshit him, he gonna undress you. And you need to leave it at that, because up until his late 70s, it wasn't a good idea to try him physically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because he's a massive human being. And one of the kindest persons in terms of using his talents and his gifts to help other people. And I got in a lot of trouble putting him on the cover of my book, Real Men Don't Play, because he had that kofi on, right? And people kept assuming he was a Muslim.
Yeah.
People keep assuming Jim is this, that, and other. Now they think he's a traitor because he went to the White House to meet with Trump. And I'm like, you dumb motherfuckers. What you don't understand is he's the president of the United States. When Obama was the president, Jim helped him get elected twice. And we were living off of contracts. When we weren't living off of contracts, we were living off Jim's money. And he met payroll for 30 years. If it meant getting on planes, signing autographs or whatever, to take care of guests who might make it and might not, because the attrition rate was astronomical. When you're trying to keep a guy who has never worked a day in his life and is a predator by nature to get up for noon, because the freaks come out at night. So Jim had invested in human development to the extent that he could relate to me, because I reminded him of some people that he had a lot of respect for. One was Richard Pryor. One was Ralph Wiley, an amazing sports writer. And had Wiley not died, you know, I wouldn't have got that spot that I got with Jim. So when you ask me about Jim Brown, he's one of the greatest human beings and one of the most complicated yet simple people I've ever met.
Yeah,
and I love him like a father.
You introduced me to him. You remember that? You brought me to the house, and I got to tell you, he is a very, very powerful force. I wasn't expecting him to be. He was very soft spoken when I spoke to him, and gentle. Like I remember when I just shook his hand and just he was, but yeah, like his presence though was definitely.
Well, you was a good student, because I warned you when you went up there a couple of things not to do. Don't say nothing you don't mean. And whatever you do, don't use role model. Because first thing you're going to ask you is, who's a role model? Jesus? How many of them is that? No, and see, Jim would play with you like that, you know, but the fact that you remember better than I do, see, I remember the disasters. You know, the people I done took up at it just got me, oh, Lord Jesus, man.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. So I'm glad that you remember meeting one of the greatest human beings that has ever lived.
Unbelievable. I mean, I felt like I feel like I'm fortunate to have met him. I mean, everything that he's done and everything that he's got involved in terms
and still does. Okay. Yeah. At 84 years old, man, he's still committed to the struggle. It's just got more complicated because nobody really cares about people until they see evidence that it's working. See, every time we would go into a community and change lives, the money would run out because nobody really wants to spend money on that kind of thing. Even the people in the community. One of the most profound and prophetic and sad things I learned from Jim Brown about my own culture. He said, I'm going to tell you something about black people, Bobby. They'll buy what they want and beg for what they need. And I've seen that in us. Because I've traveled with Jim around the country, man, and we started an AmerI-Can program in my hometown of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. He came down. We stayed 4 days, man, 4 days to raise money. And we didn't raise but $10,000 out of a community that should have raised, with the trouble we was having, the killings and all of that, at least $200,000. That way we got total control of the program. See, the funding ain't gonna run out, because if we get the results, we're gonna keep pouring into that, because we done lowered the crime rate, the school attendance is improving, grades are going up, there's stability in the community. That didn't mean enough to my people, because we expected the government to do that. And that's what Jim has always shunned away from, because it comes with too many strings. But he was right. He said, Bobby, they want my autograph. And they want me to take a picture with them. But what we want is an autograph on a check. that they're not going to write.
Exactly.
And it was disarming. But he continued to do the same work all over the country, man. I can't tell you the times, the people he's buried, the people he's helped. I've seen women bring their kids up there as a last gasp, just because, his door was open. And he cares about people. And that's not the things people publicize. But one thing about Jim is this. If you don't like him, leave him alone. Because chances are you in his house. Now, if you get put out and it gets violent, he asked you to leave. You see? So he's not a perfect guy. And sometimes I was with him a couple of weeks ago, and we got into it about Trump. And we resolved it.
Wait, you spoke to him about it?
Several times.
About the whole thing? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because in my opinion, Jim got misled into the first trip to Trump Towers. No, actually it was it was Trump Towers. They met the first time in Trump Towers. Some people around him were trying to gain favor. And Jim went there to meet with Ben Carson because Ben Carson had an appropriation available. Jim was there for a line item. He said, I pay my taxes. My people pay their taxes. That's our money that they fuck off every year with programs that don't work. But that never came out. All they did was show Jim and Ray Lewis. And next thing you know, Jim was an Uncle Tom and a sellout.
Yeah, they put him next to Kanye.
That was the next time.
It was exactly when he went to the White House. It was him and Kanye were the. I know. I was flabbergasted when I heard the things that they were saying about Jim Brown because I was like, this is what I mean about people that just completely act like history began in 2016. You know what I'm saying? It is so frustrating to me. I'm like, okay, so this man has devoted his life to all of these causes, and now because he's at the White House, ultimately they're, like you said,
for a line item. Not charity.
Yeah, right.
Not charity.
He's there doing work on behalf of what he does, and because he's sitting with, he ain't got no choice who the hell the people elected president. That's the president. That's who he's got to go talk to.
That's what happened.
It's so polarizing. And there's a system, I believe, I know some people don't, but I believe that it's inherent because when the founding fathers created this entire fucking thing in the very beginning, there was people who Madison brought up in the meeting when they were talking about creating the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in the United States and all that. When they were having this discussion, Madison said, if we have democracy, then all the poor people will come take away rich people's property because they outnumber us. That's the ultimate problem with democracy. He raised that issue. And I do believe that they knew that was a problem. And so I think that wealthy people have set out to create an illusion of democracy while at the same time maintaining systemic control over everything. And part of doing that is by making sure that you keep everybody at each other's throats. Keep them completely poorly
Why do you think
informed.
we have an electoral college? See, they fool you with one man, one vote. But who elects the president, or who selects the president? The Electoral College.
Absolutely.
That's a big difference between the Electoral College and one man, one vote.
Mm-hmm.
I'm back to you get a propaganda to the proper goose. People put that I voted stick on it. I voted. Yeah, it ain't going to matter because you are not electing the president of the United States. The Electoral College is going to do that. Mm-hmm. Hillary won by 3 million votes. So what? One man, one vote, my ass. It's where those concentration of votes are. And so as we sit here tonight, the government going to find this out because you pretty radical son of a bitch yourself. Me and Thommy, we just good old Americans at the end of the day. You know, it's a city country thing. He's from Boston, I'm from Murfreesboro. We love people. So y'all can back the fuck up off of us. We are not the problem. Okay.
Exactly.
We're trying to fix some things so that there's, just a better quality of life. Because at the end of the day, Jim taught me this. He said, Bobby, I don't care who you are. Everybody wants to be loved and cared for. Absent of that,
that's it.
No, it's gonna be some problems. The people we see that's doing all this crazy shit, man, they are hurting so bad, man, that they just can't take it no more. And it's intensifying each and every year. You see more people that are not adjusting to adversity because it's been a long time since they had to struggle. And they're too old to go back and do all of that stuff again, so they take the easy route out. They shoot everybody in the house.
Yep. That's crazy. That's the game. It's like I noticed that the more democracy we have, the more inequality we have, the less inequality we have, the more democracy we have, the less democracy we have, the more inequality we have. And it does seem striking to me that through the period when FDR's policies were in place and we had it set up so that there was very little inequality, that was during the civil rights movement, that was during like the hippie movement, all these things happened during that time period because people started to have a voice because they will start looking around at shit when they have the ability to do that.
You know, I'm glad
but when
you
you keep people's
head
down and focused on having to work and survive and be focused on their next paycheck to survive, they're less likely to look at what's going on around them.
For black people, the civil rights era was the worst time in American history.
My best friend, he's like one of my best friends, this kid Gemini from the East Coast, and he's a black dude, and he said he tells me that all the time. He says, I hate the civil rights movement, but I want to hear what you...
Because it started with that goddamn song. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. When the fuck is someday? Who has ever accomplished anything sustainable? I'm going to do it someday.
Absolutely. That
bullshit sent us chasing after white folks. See, one thing that's always been going on is social interaction between people. My grandma ran an after-hour joint, Miss AmerI-Can Cafe, right? All you had to do was have money. You couldn't come in there without no money. And the good time rolled every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, black folk, white folk, you just had to have some money. But it was in a black neighborhood because white folk didn't act like that.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So people just don't even really know. The people that they think are all of that, they're the ones cheating in the next room.
Well, to even arrive at that shouldn't have even happened in the first place, because if the 40 acres and a mule thing would have happened, then over time they would have black people would have just wound up creating their own.
Hold on, right there.
Don't you feel like that?
No. See, here's the problem. And I want reparation, but what we need first is preparation, because we've been indoctrinated to consume. All you got to do.
All of us have.
No, not like black folk. Ooh, my goodness, boy, we'll spend money with anybody. The Japanese spend money with the Japanese. The Koreans spend money with the Koreans. Okay.
That's like Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent. When he talks about that, do you know what I'm talking about?
No, help me. Every day's a school day.
Yeah, no, it's he talks about that, how there's an intentional, they intentionally create consumers, like driven citizens, because that's part of the way to distract people from their rights being taken away, like all these things. And so it's just but I wanted to but that's...
Well, where I'm going with that is this: in a capitalistic society, greed aside, what makes it work and work very well to the point where it supports a middle class is consumption. But you got to have a certain wage to consume. Otherwise, you just keep grinding the same people over and over and over and over again, and you exhaust the supply of that money. Now, you're sitting on all this other money, but if you don't put some of that money back in circulation, you're going to have anarchy. And we are getting ever closer to that, because these people have been lied to. The farmers have been lied to. The manufacturers have been lied to. People said, Trump said, we're going to build all these factories. No, you're not. Because that money's offshore. Right. And that money's chasing cheap labor. They don't give a fuck what color you are. If you'll work for 50 cents an hour, you're the people we're looking for. So unless we innovate, that thing is going to continue to happen, and it's going to engulf more and more people. You got kids coming out of college now with $150,000, $200,000 worth of debt, and they working at
Starbucks.
There you go.
$10 an hour.
There you go.
That's a huge
go.
problem. And education didn't even cost hardly anything up until the 80s.
Well, it shouldn't cost that much because what you're paying for is the opportunity cost. In other words, when I went to college back in the 70s, I think my books cost maybe $300 for the year. But then that's when I first saw the hustle. If you paid $20 for that book, and at the end of the semester, just one semester, they gave you $2 for that book and resold it for $17.
Exactly.
So
they still do that, by the way.
I was saying it's really out of control now because it cost you $1,000 just for books, you see. And then it depends on what you're majoring in, because they're gonna let you fuck off all the time you want as long as you got the money to do that,
right? Through
the student loans that you can't get rid of for life. Okay. So,
and death.
Oh, you ain't lying. So I guess what I hope we're doing with your audience tonight is giving them something to look at a little bit differently, because at 65, I'll be 66 in July, I've accepted the responsibility of moving into that stage where my utility is teaching. And I just depends on who the students are, but the lesson is the same, man. Life is not fair. But actually it is. Because you can go through the worst year of your life and wake up one morning and say, damn, man, I'm still here. And then you look behind you and you see all the bodies strong. The people that had more than you had, and they gone with the wind. But you're still here. And it becomes an internal thing. What do I want to do with the rest of my time? And I chose to teach, and I'm thankful for this opportunity to come and be with you tonight, man, because, it just happened like that. We met each other, and in 18 hours, we never forgot each other. We didn't see each other for a number of years, but
Well, I mean, it's even deeper than that. Like some of the stuff that you said to me on that train when we started talking, because we started having a heavy conversation, and then we exchanged numbers. Mm-hmm. And then one day I called you even after that, when I was on the East Coast, and I told you I was going through some stuff. Mm-hmm. And again, you gave me some information. Then I came out to LA when I was dating that Megan girl. And again, you gave me information. You've been a mentor to me in a lot of ways. And the stuff that you have said to me has not only, in fact, I'm going to share something with you that I think might really blow your mind. So there is a girl that I know named Courtney Allen. She is a white girl from Maine. She used to be a drug addict, okay? She used to read my Facebook statuses all the time. I constantly write beautiful articles that I'm trying to put out to create change and make people think. I used to use a lot of your influence and things that you told me about your world being small and about what happened to your son, that stuff.
My nephew.
Or your nephew, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes, your nephew. I apologize. And I remember you telling me about the can't thing, and you telling me how powerful that is, and you telling me about people that try to get into your life and shrink the size of your world, and how important it is to make sure that you always maintain a broad perspective and always believe that anything can be possible. All of these things were things that you taught me over a series of several conversations. I created this article and I posted it on Facebook, and that girl, Courtney Allen, who was a drug addict at the time, or I think maybe just had started recovering or something, told me that it was one of the most important things that she had ever read. She was so moved by it. She didn't know that they were your words. She credited me for them. And I had to tell her about you. So eventually I got her on the phone. I said, let me tell you about this guy I know named Bobby. And I told her about how you and I met and how I learned all this stuff from you. She said, well, this is just, she was like, it moved her so much that she then started to get her shit together so crazy that she started to get money from the state government to be able to fund rehabs, and then started to become a super pillar in her community. She has now moved on to where she's working. She went to Washington, D.C. Somehow, I don't know if she spoke to certain people or whatever, but she convinced them to give her an opportunity to go to school to learn the things she needed to learn so that she can be groomed into politics. And she's now working for, what's his name? The former former governor of Maine. I'm forgetting his name, but he's a big guy in politics. That used to be the governor of Maine. I'm forgetting his name. I might have to Google it. But anyway, I'll Google it in a second. But she's working for him now in Washington, D.C. and like on her way to like do major things. I believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, she's going to become a senator. Like, I mean, and it's just like the stuff that you told me was so powerful that it didn't just affect my life. I repeated it to a lot of people, and a lot of people who I repeated that shit to, it changed their lives. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that like, to be able to have an effect on somebody, a positive effect on somebody that powerful, and then have them take that same thing that you gave to them and pass it on and affect all these lives. And now there's all these people whose lives have been affected because you met me on a train and you said some of the things you said is just absolutely astonishing to me.
It's the circle of life. And I mentioned my Uncle James Glanton and my Uncle Simon, my Uncle Luther, certain people in my community, and Brother Harry Pickens, who's in my book, Real Men Don't Play, that people can get on Amazon, changed my life. Harry told me, he said, Bobby, that which you seek purely in your heart is also seeking you. And the way that he said it, I couldn't shake it because I know how to perform and put on the mask, just like we all do. And that's exactly what we get in exchange out here in this universe. But when you finally realize that's not really what you're seeking, that you want to get to another plateau, then you have to literally get naked and be pure in your heart about what it is you want. And it's amazing how that law of attraction works in that way. Because when he told me that, when Harry told me that, he said, I'll be honest with you, I don't know why I'm telling you that, but he did know because of the contrast in us. You know, I was streetwise and he was square as L7, but a genius, man, an absolute genius with a great heart. And we just counterbalanced each other. And the same could be said about me meeting you. When I met you, man, I was so tired of running into young people that wouldn't listen, man. You know,
I'm getting that way now. I mean, it's hard. It's
so
like, look what
it
you're up
inspired
against.
me, man. It inspired me to keep going. You know, and you just shared with me what it did for you. A fast change ain't no robbery, man. And we're at a point in the world's history where we do have to reconnect the generations. Not to the extent where we try to tell y'all what to do in a certain way, but at least make you aware of how we got this far. Because when I listen to your music, I was like, he actually got some words that make some sense to me. And you had a nice little flow with it, and you put some new funk with it, you know. And I'm like, I was in the studio with him, right? And I was in there like, I had to catch myself. I was like, damn, man, this motherfucker done got me.
Yeah, I remember when you came by Laramie. That was fun.
Yeah,
that was fun. One of the things you said to me that I never forgot too, as I remember I told you, I said, this was a few years later when I was dating Megan. I called you and I said, Bobby, I blew a shitload of my money because all these kids that I grew up with on the street thought they convinced me that I had to keep it real. And if I didn't go back and give to them, I was somehow, and I went and I gave it to them. And you said to me, you said, they don't know the value of money. This is exactly what you said. You said, they don't know the value of money yet. So you need to go there and you need to give them advice and then go back later and see who took it. And then only help the ones who took it as like a screening process to see what people you should even be helping in the first place, because they don't understand the value of money yet. That's what you said to me. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I was like, oh my God, because at the time, like, that was like huge to me. I mean, you have to understand that the way I grew up, I didn't really have a lot of like, I didn't have any like adults in my life ever telling me shit like that, So some of the things that you said were so effective. And and just changed me in a major way. And like, I really believe that I have been made a far better person today because having met you.
And likewise, because I remember I went to one of your shows, man, and it was up in Hollywood, and that shit was so goddamn loud. My heart was racing and stuff, you know. And I told him, I said, look here, man, some of your shit I can't come to because it's too goddamn loud. I'm talking about the bass was all the way back up in my chest, you know. And I was like, man, I can't take this shit. And the groups other than you, I couldn't stand the shit that they was doing, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I could talk to you like that and say, look, there's some shit I ain't gonna be able to do with you, okay? And you still allow me to decide what that would be. You know, what was that movie you did with Tyrese?
Oh, Waist Deep.
Yeah. You know, you invited me on the set. You let my man do the security and stuff, you know. So you was pliable, you know what I mean? And so it worked for both of us. But the problem in this country is we're not seeing examples of what really works in terms of human behavior. One of my very closest friends is one of the most iconic men in the world. His name is Jerry West. And I met Jerry through the vice president of the Memphis Grizzlies it'll be 8 years this year, okay? And he was as close to Jerry as I was to Jim. And Jim and Jerry had never met, okay, in terms of spending any length of time together. And we all got together in L.A. It was the most amazing night of my life, man. And it made me comfortable enough to tell Jerry West, man, you're a nigga. And he looked at me like, man, I'm uncomfortable with that. I said, Jerry, you from West Virginia. We was poor. Y'all was poor. Okay. Everybody got black lung, drank all the time.
It's a coal miner town.
It's worse than that. That's dead now, so they doing Oxycontin around the clock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Jerry's passionate about helping his people. But when he went to college and then started playing professional basketball, he said on the show that we're working on, he said, I gravitated to people that reminded me of me. People that had been told they wasn't shit. They wasn't going to never be nothing. And that meant he gravitated to black people. But he could still be white and not have to apologize for it. Because he was one of the people that was poor that didn't settle for being poor. And so I don't have to condescend around him. And I can say, Jerry, you are the shining light for white America, man. Because you don't get, soft about it. We can talk about race, honestly. And we can talk about people, honestly, because he hates being a celebrity. But he has to deal with it. Yeah. Because, he's been through enough to know how to appreciate a friend. And you can't buy that. And so this goes a long way tonight to show whatever your population is and how many people we can drive to hear this interview and to follow what we do going forward as an example that don't get caught up in the bullshit, because you're really looking for something else. And you got to step outside of your comfort zone to get that. And it's invigorating. This has been inspiring. And we're going to wrap it up in a few minutes because we're going to leave them something. Mm-hmm. Something. You know what I mean? Who knows where this is going to go? Right. But it's going to go in the right direction because people are thirsty for this, man. I see young people all the time, man, and they want more. They want more of the realness of life instead of being wedded to these things right here that I have them walking out in front of a car and getting ran the fuck over because they think it's in here. No, this is the best computer there ever was and ever will be. And this thing will put it to sleep. They say it's a smartphone, but it'll make you dumb. It sure will. I used to know 150 numbers in my head, man. Now I got to look at faces on here and say, well, where the goddamn number at?
I know. I remember I knew everyone's number, and now it's like even my closest friends in the world, I'm like, what's your number?
It's nuts, man. So how you want to wrap this up, man?
I mean, whatever. I mean, like, at the end, well, first of all, I think that you should plug. When is that the 2-hour thing with Jerry West?
It's not the 2 hours. It's the battle for L.A.
The battle for
Jerry
LA.
was the first interview, and we're going to intersperse that with interviews with people I know that played for the Lakers, were part of the Laker organization, that are in the Laker organization now. Lionel Hollins, who is one of the assistant coaches of the L.A. Lakers, I met him when he was the coach for the Memphis Grizzlies, okay? And we'll interview a broad range of people. I got a friend of mine named Jerry Chambers. He played for the Clippers, and he was the number 1 draft pick of the Lakers back in 1966, So he knew Wilt Chamberlain very, very well. So the Battle of L.A. talks about the history and the evolution of these two teams, you see. And you can't talk about the Lakers without talking about Jerry West from 1960.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So we took a ride in that interview, but we also talked about other things, outside of just basketball. So the Battle of L.A. is an opportunity to show what the city is dealing with right now, because they lost today. The Clippers did to the Lakers. And I got 50 phone calls from people that know about my relationship with Jerry and how I've been talking shit all year that the Lakers were going to never beat them. All right. So it's going to be a fantastic look at the season and the people inside the game. The other podcast I'm doing is called Counterpunch with Russell Peters.
I love that name.
That's
a really good name.
And you know who Russell Peters is, probably.
Russell Peters? The name doesn't strike. Who is he?
Google him. Russell Peters is one of the wealthiest and most successful comedians in the business the last 30 years.
Really?
Yeah. And the reason you don't know him is the name don't match up, because he's a 100% Indian descent. But he was born in Toronto. His parents are from India, and the British took over and gave him that name, right? So he grew up in Toronto. But for the last 30 years, man, he has made, oh my God, man, so much money. And he's a beautiful spirit, fanatic for boxing, because he grew up in a gym with Lennox Lewis, the former heavyweight champion of the world, and because he was in a diverse city and race mattered. And, the men in the dark, right? And one of the reasons me and him get along is I tell him, man, you got a nigga nose. And he's like, he said, you crazy as fuck, And so we became friends through some other people. And so we came up with this podcast that we're in the final negotiations with. You ever heard of Studio 71?
No.
You need to look into them. Google it. Look in that for them, Studio 71. They big, man. They huge. And they are tendering an offer for that show, and iHeart and Apple, they're going back and forth bidding for the show, because we shot a powerful pilot with Sean Showtime Porter and his father, Kenny Porter. They, got the buzz going. And we just missed the big fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, which would make a whole show in and of itself, with my opinions about it. And so we're going to be coming online with that in the next 45 days or so. Matter of fact, shout out to one of the people that I'll be interviewing in person in Minneapolis on April the 11th, a fighter named Jamal Shango James. He's fighting for the welterweight championship, or the interim welterweight champion, which assures he'll get a real title fight after he whoops this boy from Puerto Rico. And then they got a Cuban boy that's been up there in Minnesota with them. His name is David Morrell. Woo-wee. Oh, my goodness. I'm just glad it's going to be a little warmer by the time I get up there. So I'm excited about that, and putting Uncle Bobby's Country Corner back online. And I can't wait to, for when y'all see this show, whenever you see it, get Uncle Bobby. I got 2 books. One is called Let's Go to Work. Okay. The Millionaire Chronicles of Leon T. Guard. He lived to be 103 years old, and by the time me and him came close enough that we decided to write the book, I said, Mr. God, how did you become a millionaire? He said, if you want to make money, you got to make friends. He said, I still can't spell a million, but I got plenty of them. Plenty of them. And like my uncle used to tell me, my Uncle Simon, he specialized in selling money out of his grocery store. He said, Bobby, I got enough money to burn up a wet dog. So the point I'm making is I'm a storyteller, man, and I've survived the trials and tribulations of life, and that's the only reason I think I'm still here is to share these stories. So get Real Men Don't Play and Let's Go to Work, and then who knows, man, we got a book in us, man, that will blow the socks off folks.
I would love to. I would love to. Oh, my God, that would be amazing.
I'm putting it out there in the universe now.
I do recommend, too, anybody who's listening to this, definitely, if you ever get the chance to see Uncle Bobby's Country Corner, I love the way you interview people.
Mm.
You are so sharp. I'm telling you. I was talking about it with Susan about it before, and it's just you're really, really good at it.
We're gonna go ahead and just give him a little spiel about Jason Whitlock.
Yes, that interview.
I met Jason, not just the interview,
Oh.
Jason himself. And we're all complicated, right? I met Jason when he was writing for the Kansas City Star, and I loved his writing. You know, he's an incredible writer. And then he transformed into television because, you know, the writing stuff dried up. And a lot of people that were sports journalists became television journalists. Stephen A. Smith worked for the Philadelphia paper. And most of the guys you see on television came, a lot of them, Skip Bayless, all those guys were reporters, news journalists, sports journalists. So anyway, I met him through some correspondence. And he brought us to Kansas City, Jim and I and some of the guys, because they was having killings in Kansas City. And so he's done some you know, cutting edge things. He did a story for Playboy that was powerful about incarceration nation, because we took him into the jails and he saw firsthand it's just black and brown up in here. And he did a wonderful article, and Playboy butchered it because they paid him his money and did what they wanted to with it. So I have mixed emotions about Jason, and he used my platform to legitimize himself in the black community, and it cost me some friends, and it also awakened me to the reality that I'm not to be pigeonholed. You see what I mean? Because I took you over to my man's house, played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you was the only white boy in there, and it didn't make a difference. No. Not a bit, because you didn't act white, and they didn't act black. They just doing what they do. You see what I mean? And so people at the end of the day are people. And Jason Whitlock, fabulous writer, very, you know, witty, but in many ways he's a troubled soul. Okay, because in the world that he flourished, even when he was younger, black people criticized him. You know, he was unattractive, overweight, and smart. And, you know, in some of our communities, we got a thing about smart kids. You know, you get ostracized. And so it made him, to a degree, bitter. So a lot of the shows that you've seen, even when he made a good point, he would tarnish it with that bitterness, you know. And it took me on an interesting ride that you gave me credit for, but it cost me a lot of my friends, man, because they like, oh, Bobby a coon now. And I told him, kiss my ass and I give you 15 minutes to draw a crowd. Because some of the things that Jason say are correct. I think OJ did it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that I'm kind of a believer in that, too. I wasn't for the longest until I saw that interview that had been kept secret for years that came out where he had the If I Did It interview.
No, he wrote a book.
No, he wrote a book, but he also did an interview to a reporter. Yeah. And he said, so he goes, I went in the house. I was mad because, you know, blah, blah, blah. I had my knife. Now, keep in mind, this is all if I had done it. And then he's like, and then I did. And I'm like, is this guy serious, right? Like, why? I mean, that was what made me go, come on, man. Like, at this point.
Nothing has changed this country more in the last 40 years than that case. Whether he did it or not.
That's so true. That is so
I think it was Chris Rock said, black people got too happy and white folk got too upset. Because when they put that camera on Dominic Dunn, when they read the verdict and his jaw dropped, I said, oh, Lord, this is going to get bad, man.
You know how that single-handedly changed America? I'll tell you the most powerful way it changed America. The 24-hour news cycle. Because when they followed that Bronco, and they got the ratings they got from that entire thing.
They've been chasing ambulances ever since.
They've been chasing that white Bronco every news day of every day since.
But I think you have to also consider the legislative side of that. Okay, used to be they wouldn't even come to the house if you beat up your woman. Now they came up with a charge called terrorist threat. Didn't require no physical damage. I'm afraid for my life. Somebody going to jail. And that has morphed into Me Too. And I've had enough experiences in the last couple of years with women that, you know, they work out and everything. And, you know, and it's like, please.
The Me Too movement, the problem that I have with the Me Too movement is like, this is just to give you an example. I saw a girl who was a model or a pageant lady, and she had wrote a tweet on Twitter saying something regarding how Donald Trump was a scumbag because, now granted, again, we're talking about Trump, so I know Liz, whatever, but put it into context of just what I'm talking about, not President Trump and racist Trump, and I'm just referring to just the specific, yeah. So she says he's a scumbag because he would go to pageants and he would take advantage of vulnerable women by offering them careers and positions to go back to the Trump Towers with him and do sexual deeds with them. And I said, wait, hold on a second now. So wait a minute. You just said a second ago there ain't no robbery and a fair exchange.
Right.
So how in the world is this guy a scumbag? How is he taking advantage of somebody? And again, it's not even Trump. I just mean a man in general. If you're a man and you have money and power and you go into a room, isn't it kind of also that this girl knows that you can get something from you?
Absolutely.
So it's kind of like a fair exchange. So
it just hadn't been negotiated.
Exactly. And so in the circumstances where now Harvey is a little bit of an exception because Harvey, there's actual physical evidence of him grabbing and raping and being all rapey and shit. But like the idea that he would be sleazy is not criminal. To be sleazy, if you offer a girl, hey, want to be in a movie? I'm a producer. Sleep with me and you can be in a movie. She's got a choice to make. She can either say, fuck you, you're a sleaze, or she could sleep with you and get in a movie. But you
Hollywood.
Can't, right. But Hollywood. You can't like come out later and say, after you've got all your millions and you're wearing your $10,000 dress and you're in front of the country on television wearing $14,000 diamond necklaces and be like, yeah, that guy, gave me roles, but I had to sleep with him for it. It's like, okay,
that's a whole nother show, Thommy. And it's a very important one to have. Right. Because some of the things that are going on now are here forever. All right. But we do have to have some guidelines to deal with this shit, man, because you should never hit a woman and a woman should never act like she's a man physically. Because if you strike me, and then come to court in a dress with a Bible on your arm, I think that's a misrepresentation of what started this shit in the first place. You slapped the shit out of me.
Right. Well, I mean, when the fire department shows up to a house that burned down, the very first thing they ask or look into is, how did this start?
There you go. So we need to keep our hands off of each other. All right. And so this Me Too thing needs to morph into We Too. You see what I mean? Because we have to treat each other more kinder and more better because whatever you decide to do, you have a right up until the point where you come over here in my lane.
I can agree with that.
So let's figure out, the line of demarcation and get back to just caring about each other, man.
Absolutely.
I know it's a far-fetched idea in this day and age, but that's, pretty much how I see it, man.
It's love, man.
Yeah.
That's the best thing. That's the best words ever for us to end on because that's facts.
All right.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you for letting me be myself.